Um, all right, so we are going to move on to our day chair and speaker for today. So I'm going to invite Brian up, but Brian, I'll introduce him in maybe in further detail than he shared in his introduction there. But Brian Herder is a Chief Creative Officer in Russell Herder, a Twin Cities-based ad agency and international certified B Corp. As an agency partner with more than 40 years of innovative creative work, Brian has a deep understanding of what it takes to produce ideas that engage and endure. Working in fields as diverse as healthcare and destinations, he helped major brands across the U.S. expand their diversify. Brian believes the best outcomes, however, are grounded in personal truths and has extensive experience working within Minnesota within Minnesota's cultural communities with talent such as Benny Roberts to create issue messaging that is uniquely relevant. Please welcome Brian Herder.
Thank you. And I sure wish Carol was able to be here today. I'm happy to be here. She's just better at this than I am. But I'm also very happy to be introducing Benny Roberts, who is one of the most talented people I've had the opportunity to work with in a very long while. Benny works with Urban Ventures. He's the VP of Programs for that organization, a very impressive organization. And I guess I'll just ask Benny to come up and give his part of the program. And
Thank you. I'm not being lazy with the sitting down. I have a chronic pain in my knee, so knee's a little tight this morning. So bear with me. My name is Benny Roberts. I said in my brief intro that I'm born and raised in St. Paul, currently live in Minneapolis. I'm vice president of youth and career programs at Urban Ventures, organization in South Minneapolis, for those of you who may be familiar. And I also have an art business and some other ventures that I work on in my personal time and with my family. And so I am excited just to share with you guys a little bit today about community voice. And through the work I've done with Russell Herder, with Carol and Brian, I'm really excited about just some intel I can give you that I think could be helpful in the way we interact as a society and how we move forward. And so I've been in this kind of work, human services, youth work, for over 2 decades. I know I look like I'm a kid myself, but I've had a lot of experience doing this work. I remember the story really vividly. In 2010, I was working with this young man as a case manager. I received his case file from Hennepin County, and I went to his house to do the initial meeting. And I sat down with him. This kid was like on the brink of getting residential treatment services. And so like really dire straits for their family. And so as I shared the notes that I had with him, I told him, hey, TJ, I have the same interests as you. I'm also into music. I love sports. I hear you love Italian food, all of these things. We're having this conversation and I'm relating to him. And then when we finish our conversation, he looked really perplexed. And I asked him what was going on. And the first thing he said to me was, "Who's TJ?" And I was like, "Well, your file said that your nickname was TJ." And he said, "I don't go by that." And I was really like, huh? So then we started backpedaling and he's like, "I don't even like Italian food." And 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 he's like, "I sort of like sports. I'm really not good at them, but I'll play with my friends." And like everything that I knew about the kid was wrong. So we laughed really hard. And I was like, "All right, let's start over again. What's your name?" And we start to engage with each other. He told me that the lady that did the intake seemed really nervous around them, so she wanted to get out of their house as soon as possible. So she probably was just rushing through her notes or maybe even mixing up clients. And that was the official file of who this kid was in his case management folder. And so I had to apologize to him and then also learn what his real nickname was and wanted to figure out a way to give him dignity in the way we responded with one another. But I realized something in that moment, that we could be so smart and so dumb at the same time. Right. Like we'll take information that was given to us by somebody who's an expert, right? And then we'll run with that as if that's the way things ought to be, oftentimes without checking to make sure that that information was correct itself. And so as a kid that grew up in the cities, um, I have a lot of pride about growing up in the Twin Cities. I used to ride the bus everywhere. I didn't even need a license until I went to college in St. Louis, because their metro system is nowhere near as advanced as ours. If I missed a bus in St. Louis, it'd take an hour to get within the city. And so I felt really blessed to grow up in the cities and have those kind of resources. And I also learned something really different. Like when you ride the bus, you experience your community very differently. When you're on the bus, you go stop by stop. You wait for a bus or you wait for your stop. All kinds of different people get on that bus. There's business professionals, there's homeless people, there's people that smell really good, there's people that don't. Um, there's babies screaming, there's people with headphones on. It's all walks of life in this one thing. Then there's the other folks that like they want to let you know that they have a car, but it's in the shop, so they want you to know they're better than you. But and then I got a car. And then when I got a car, I love the city, but I found myself always driving out of it. I was going to Mall of America in Bloomington. I was going to Southdale. I was going to Rose. I went to malls a lot, apparently. I was doing a lot of shopping, but everywhere I was going, I was in my car all over the city, less time and less time in my own community. The car took me everywhere. I realized this is embarrassing to admit to you guys, but I learned how to ride a bike during the pandemic. I was 34. My daughter wanted me to teach her how to ride a bike, not mommy. She wanted daddy to teach her, but she didn't know I didn't know. And so my wife had to teach me while I was teaching her how to ride a bike without her knowing that I was being taught. So it was fun, but I fell in love with biking. And ever since that, 4 years ago, I bike like every single day except for when it's below 50. Um, I've experienced the city in a completely different way biking. When you see the bike trails, you know where all the graffiti things are, you know where the other homeless encampments are, you know where some of the hiding spots are, you know where the lakes are. You get a view of like everything in a way you never imagined. And then I also realized the other way to experience my community was just walking. The slow pace of walking. I see this thing, it's like 5 minutes away walking, and I embrace it, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I hear conversations more fully. Everything changes. Why do I say all of these things to you? Because oftentimes when we talk about communities, we don't get our information from walking, from riding a bike, from getting on the bus or driving. We usually get it from research. How do most people research? Google. They look for stats, they look for figures, they look for reports, they look for next door posts, things of that nature. And it creates a dynamic that can be complicated for us to be able to embrace a community well, and also consider the value that could be in the voices in the community. And so I bought my first home a little over 5 years ago in North Minneapolis. I got in a lot of trouble for crossing the river, but it was the biggest purchase I ever had in my life. I walked out on my yard proudly, like I just bought this for my wife. We're just looking at everything that needed to be done, and I was getting ready to go to my car, and then the police pulled up, and it was a really scary moment for me, just because I was like, "Yeah, who are they getting? Get them!" And then they stopped me, and I was like, "Ooh, okay." And they were like, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I'm looking at my house." And they're like, "How do we know it's your house?" And I was like, "A mortgage?" Um, then they asked me to show my mortgage. And I was like, "I don't know if I can produce that this quickly. I just came to check out stuff with my wife." "You're married?" "Yes, I am married." And it was like this really awkward engagement where I looked over, and my next door neighbor, or next door neighbor to be, was kind of peeking out, and then she hid. The police left, and then she came charging towards the fence, and she said, "I'm so sorry. I thought you were a person that was like scanning to get into the building." And I was like, whoa, what an assumption. But what I realized was a lot of her data was rooted in fear, and it was affecting her ability to engage and connect. I didn't want to demonize my neighbor. I was going to be my neighbor. She is my neighbor. I realized, though, that what she's experienced and what she was fearful of led the way she engaged with me. And so in that, I realized that if you want to find out what's actually going on in the community, you have to go to the community. I told her I would really appreciate it just in the future that you don't start with the police. You actually come and say, hey, excuse me, no one has this house. And I can be like, I'm actually the one that bought it. And then we can have a really fun conversation. I'll bake you an apple pie and we'll do all of that stuff. You know, you actually don't want my apple pie, but I'll buy it from like Lunds and Byerly's and rip the label off. And, you know how we do it, right? So we actually have grown a really amazing relationship over the years, but I know it started from a really weird place. And in saying that, she told me about the challenges they've had in the neighborhood and how not to engage and how to engage. My house was vacant for a while, so it was just kind of an easy target. Oh, the pipes are missing, or people just walk through your yard because they know no one's there. And that was happening the first month or so that I lived in my house. And then there was a car sitting out my in my front yard, and I was trying to figure out what they were doing. And my neighbor said, "Do not engage. Just write their license plate number down, and we'll submit it to the authorities." And I was like, "I don't want to do that." So I walked up to this car. Maybe I was ignorant, maybe it was crazy, but I saw some guy look like he was doing a transaction of some sort, and I just said, "Excuse me, I have a wife and a daughter." And I would just really appreciate if whatever you're doing, I'm not going to judge you for it. I know people have different ways of living and different ways of trying to survive, but can you please not do that in front of our home? And can you please be mindful that there's a lot of kids on this block? And the guy apologized to me. He rolled his window up and he drove away. And I never saw the car again. And then the activity started to slow down. The more I just walked up to people and was like, "Excuse me, I'm not here to tell you where you're going at in the afterlife. I'm not here to do any of that with you, but I do want to let you know that there are kids here." And those kind of things kind of brought us to a connection and humanity that I thought helped us move forward and not operating out of fear in our relationships. Um, when I got approached to do this work with Brian and Carol for Russell Herder, they wanted to talk about challenges that were happening in the community. They wanted to find out who had a voice to be able to articulate what's going on in the community. And I was first really appreciative that they reached out because they said they didn't want to be the ones to tell the story of what's going on in the community as an entity. They wanted to localize the narrative so that it was something that people could relate to. That doesn't happen often. And so I asked about like, what are the parameters? What kind of freedoms do we have? How can we work on this together? And every step of the way, I felt so encouraged. Um, they were wanting to bring more awareness to the opioids crisis that we're experiencing in our state and in our country. And they wanted to localize it on how it's impacting like inner city communities and Black communities and things of that nature. And it was one of the best processes I ever had in my life. It was one of the works I'm most proud of. And part of it was because I worked with folks that allow my voice to have value. And I say that as a message for all of us that like even those people or even those spaces that we don't think there's expertise or value, I guarantee you they're experts in something. And oftentimes when we want to see how the world really works, it's typically the most marginalized people that have their finger on the pulse the most on what's going on. And data can never give you that. Stats and figures can never give you that. It's actually relationship and trust. And I would say from a privileged space of an entity or somebody that's a stakeholder, it takes a lot of humility to give up your expertise and allow someone else to have that as well, to be able to add value to the things that you're trying to accomplish together. I'd like to queue up the 90-second version of the video we made. We made a full-length short film. It's 8 minutes long. Well, I'm gonna spare you that today, but go on knowthedangers.org, and I would welcome you to look at the work that we did. Carol and Brian had a big hand in it, very, very big hand, putting it together, working with the state and co-creating it. Brian and Carol asked me to do like some kind of artistic expression to talk about the opioids epidemic. I wanted to do a fun alliteration with the ABCs. The full length, I think, is far more impressive, but the 90-second actually got a national award. So really proud of what we came up to together. Here you go.
Adolescents turn ancestors, black youth buoyed by bureaucracy, confined to confrontations causing criminality. This disaster dissipates our duty to demand depth, each exceptional, but few not functioning on fentanyl. Glaringly growing in grief, hindered by hundreds of hypocrisies happening, innocence intercepted by intentional ills. Jump joyfully when juniors avoid jail without judgment, cause keen eyes know kids, a lot of liquor, least in luxury living, less relaxed than Labradors, they're last on the list. Minors' mentals are mildly marred, not to neglect the nasty nightmare they noticed. Knees on necks over nickels in their neighborhood. Overdosing on opioids only increase on top of other observations. Plenty prosperous people pretend youth pitfalls are priority. Quenching their quest to become quality is quotable, but quietly a quander. Remembering relationships will bring relief. Staying sober in this society, sans support isn't a successful strategy. To triumph troubles, take the toughest trail. Entertain therapy and talk to those you trust. We can urgently untangle this ugly urban and suburban undertaking. Vices are vehemently on the verge of visibility. We want wonderful from the womb. We exist for excellence and concede expectations expertly with excitement. The yuckiness of drugs jokes are youngest, but the zeal to snooze the traps to zap our youth must reach its zenith. Because opioids kill all of us. Simple as ABC.
Opioid-involved overdose deaths have increased in Minnesota since 2000.
So in the full length, let's do it again. The the full length version goes a lot more in depth on like, why are we surprised we're having an opioids crisis? Because the people in our community have already realized the problems and how they're connected to each other. And it's only become a problem now because it's hit areas that are like where those kind of problems are foreign, if that makes sense. It's not just an urban thing now, it's suburban. It's not just suburban and urban, it's rural. It doesn't matter if you're wealthy, mega wealthy, or you're in poverty. The epidemic is like a pandemic that it impacts everybody else. And so it was fun to be able to write something tongue in cheek, a social narrative, something that people connect to, and something that is really important because there's not enough awareness on what's going on as well. Ironically, when we were working on this, every single person a part of the project had been impacted directly by the fentanyl crisis. Losing uncles, losing aunts, losing grandparents, you know, even prescription medication. Like we're talking about this, the depths of how this thing has impacted our community. It was important for that to come out that way. If it was a video that just says stats and figures and things of that nature, it'd be another thing we just scroll past on our phone or another thing we just turn off because we've heard it before, right? And so in order to get something that's going to reach people, you have to meet them where they're at. And that takes a lot of humility because when you co-create or when you work with folks, especially from a marginalized community, you might be uncomfortable because you may hear things that you didn't want to hear. It does take having some thick skin. It might also uncover unknown biases or prejudices that you might have had or they might have had, and there's a space for healing in that. I'm not a person that's like divisive, like if someone disagrees with me, they're not important. I think we're in a space that's so critically important for harmony and restoration in our society with relationships that like those things actually uncover an opportunity for maturity and growth. And so with that, we might have data that's contradicted by the voice of people because stats and figures might tell you something, but it might only be half the story. It might not even be a complete picture. And so being able to understand those things with humility will allow you to hear the voice of people a lot more accurately. My wife used to do choreography. She used to be a dancer. She still is a dancer, but she doesn't do like the choreography as much anymore. And you could be like the best dancer this side of Mississippi, right? But what happens if nobody else on your team can dance? The choreography is not as impactful. It's not as moving, right? And what if you don't know how good the dancers are on your team? You could have what you thought was the best choreography, but you limited the abilities of the rest of the folks who are in your troop or in your group. And you actually didn't come up with the best thing you could because you didn't even utilize the skills of all the folks on your team. And so when you think about how we use the community's voice, I'm begging us to include the voice of the community because I think you'll be surprised the value that it can add to anything you're trying to accomplish as an organization, as an entity, as a company. And then when you include people, it actually gives power to them in a way that often doesn't happen. As a Black American, when I speak to my elders, oftentimes I always follow up with, "How you doing?" "Oh, I'm good. It's good to see you." I always hear this no matter where I am in the country. The next thing I say after I say, "It's good to see you," is, "It's good to be seen." And for people who have lived on margins, women, people of color, immigrants, whatever you want to say, people who've lived on the margins oftentimes in spaces just don't feel seen. And when you don't feel seen, you don't feel like you can contribute. You don't feel like you can add value. And then it's not perceived that you have it to begin with. And so it perpetuates a cycle where we actually don't get the best out of our society or our people because we don't even expect it from them. And so in my closing, I'm not here to beat up on data. I think being data driven is smart. It's wise. It allows you to make sound decisions. But I hope we don't be ruled by data. Over reliance on facts and figures can oftentimes make us lazy as people. It allows us to operate in shortcuts. And we understand that human beings are dynamic. They're really hard to quantify. And so relationship is actually the way to get the most out of everything you want to. And that's a life message, that's a business message, ministry, whatever field you're operating in, that has been a universal that I've seen. Anybody can take data and manipulate it to make it sound like something. Anybody can take facts and figures and use them for or against something, the same exact information. And so we have to do the hard work of slowing down, building relationships, seeking counsel, challenging our own ideas and beliefs, and then considering others to move forward as a society. With that being the case, the best solutions that I've always seen is working through people who do work in your field. So if you run a business, who are the people that interact with your customers or your clients? And it's not just the salesperson, but it might also be your security guard. It might also be a manager. It might even be a maintenance person. At Urban Ventures, some of the folks that know everything that's going on that I get information from are our janitors because they hear everything. And they seem to like blend into every wall because you never notice them. And you'll have a whole conversation and like, "Oh my gosh," they know everything. Some of our best program ideas that I've gotten in our organization have came from maintenance workers. "I saw you guys did this. Have you thought about doing this event?" And we're like, "No." "Well, I keep hearing a lot of people talk about it." They have data that I didn't have access to, or they'll say, "We got to resurface the floor in July. You guys should do this event in June because you're going to tear the floor up if you do it, but we're going to resurface it anyways." And I'm like, whoa. Now, all of a sudden, somebody who's never done programming in our organization has actually is helping me become a better programmer. And so those things come from sources that you often won't realize. And so in my close, I just want you guys to know that the data could be rich and your data can be accurate to a degree. But if you don't have the relationship, you might miss something very valuable. We had a college program called Act 6. It's a leadership scholarship program. We always bragged as an organization. We have a 90% graduation rate, college graduation rate for this program. It's an amazing program. And I would always say, yeah, but the satisfaction rate is 69%. That tells me that trend might dip because there's something going on with kids at their school that's impacting the way they value the program. 2 years later, we went from 90% graduation rate to 78. We dropped 12% in 2 years. And so the data could say one thing that we can celebrate, but if we miss the relationship component of it, it's drastically impacting our outcomes. And so pay attention to the smoke detector that happens in relationships. And I could have summed this whole thing up and you probably would have appreciated it with this one line. How do you create a lasting change that gets attention in the community? You walk. Thank you guys for your time, and I would love to do questions and talk through. Carol told me 10 minutes of questions. I don't know what questions we'd have, but here, wait.
I have a question.
Question online.
Okay.
Am I on?
Yes.
Hi, Benny. My name is Jim Eaton and a longtime friend of Urban Ventures.
I know your name.
And have had the privilege of knowing Art Erickson, the original founder of Urban Ventures, and Dave Hahn, who's the current CEO. I'd like to just reinforce the amazing work that Urban Ventures done, and I do. And I've done two things. It's not a statement. It's a kind of a question statement. I'd like you to. We have enough time for you to give a little bigger picture of Urban Ventures, the amazing work that you do, like what you're doing, but other things, the food, the serving the whole South Minneapolis community. And also, would you comment on another wonderful, iconic person that recently passed, John Turnipseed, who I think some of our members have heard of, and the great work, because there's just so much robust work that Urban Ventures has represented for 30, 40 years. And so thank you so much for your story. I have not had the privilege of knowing you and hearing the work that you're doing. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, so Urban Ventures, we just celebrated our 30th year as an organization. We're based in South Minneapolis off Lake Street and 4th Avenue. We share our headquarter building with Cristo Rey Jesuit High School, if anyone knows the area. And so our organization spans 6 blocks on 4th Avenue. We have about 5 or 6 different programs, and we have a cradle to career model in which we serve youth and their families. And so when a kid is in their mom's belly, they can get services, prenatal care, resources and things. We have an early learning center for when the kid's born that they can attend and get high quality early education and safe supportive services, all the way up to our college and career center, where we're helping young adults and some adults find pathways towards careership and things that will help them be positive contributors to society. In between that, we work with kids of all ages in our after-school program, our summer program. We also believe that intelligence can happen in all forms. So we try to find ways to tap into that with kids and their interests through mentoring. And in mentoring, we expose them to things like music and sports and farming and coding and robotics, things like that. So it's really a full service, holistic organization. A great place to find, to tap into, to serve, volunteer, give, whatever it is. We have great leadership in Dave Hahn. Dave's my leader, and Art Erickson, who is our founder, who actually is one of his last final acts that he's done within the service. He started a construction program called Lake Street Works, and it's exposing high school students to the trades. As we know, a lot of people are retiring out of the trades and there's not a lot coming in. And so Art's initiative actually was sold to Urban Ventures, and now we operate that program to add it to our college and career center as well. And so it's a great organization, and really grateful for the last 30 years and excited for what the future holds for us. And Jim's been a great support. I knew his name as soon as he said it. So yeah, thank you.
Hi. So I actually want to start with a personal story, and then I would like your kind of input on it. So last year I had a younger couple move in my neighborhood, and I knew something was weird about them, but I couldn't really figure it out what it was. And months later, I don't know if anyone watched My Cousin Vinny. There's like a night that I'm trying to sleep and something wakes me up, and then like finally like, this is the night I'm gonna sleep. I took all my meds. And then about 4 o'clock in the morning, there's like 50 police officers right outside my house with lights and dogs and big guns, and they arrested those neighbors. So I was like, something was off. Just did not know what it was. And then after they were taken, I started talking to my neighbors, and I learned that they were drug dealers. And they were creating problems in the neighborhood and in the community. And the neighbors apparently were talking to them. And this young couple ignored their conversations. And then we reached, not we, but the neighbors reached out to our association and asked to get involved. And their response was, it's not worth our legal fees, like, to get involved. So we're not gonna get involved. So it seemed like police getting involved was the option that got them out of our community. I don't know where they are now, whether they're continuing or in jail, I don't know. But what else could our neighborhood have done to avoid police? Like you said, that lady just called the police. That, like, I did not read the signs correctly. I did not know what means having a drug dealer on your street. But like for neighbors trying to talk to them, they were very aggressive in those conversations. So what would you have done?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I don't know if I am the expert on answering all of these questions, but I'll say you also have to do what makes sense for your safety. And I'm a person that actually believes that the police are and can be a really valuable asset to a community when done well. And so I think that sometimes a call is the best thing you can do. And so it might sound like I'm contradicting what I said earlier, but that's also the truth. That like sometimes you have to make a call. Sometimes you should have a conversation. It sounds like people tried to have a conversation and that neighbor was disrespectful to them. And, you know, what else do you do? Do you have a block leader? Do you have somebody, you know, like maybe you could work those channels, but not every neighborhood has those entities established. So honestly, I'm a firm believer. I tried to talk to you, didn't work. Okay. I wouldn't go to my block leader to solve something. Like I wouldn't want someone to get aggressive with an older woman on my block. I would rather, if they have an issue, they're going to bring it to me and then I'll deal with it personally. But I wouldn't want to bring another like elderly person or a woman into the situation to solve my problem. So I would probably call the police next. And so it just really depends situation by situation. Some people really don't want to change and aren't interested. Some people have no regard for people, and that's true. It's hard to pick out who those folks are, and that's the caution that we got to have. That's the only caution we should have, is that we never know who it is. They could be our own siblings sometimes, you know, so we just got to be careful of assuming that that's what they are. But it sounds like people tried to talk to them, and I would have did the same thing as you. And then took another pill and went to sleep because it sounded like you were not getting sleep.
In there somehow.
Thank you for being here this morning, and we enjoyed the video. It alerted us to the dangers of the opioid crisis, bringing it closer to home. What can a Rotary Club like us do to somehow contribute to solving or helping to solve?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a lot of different ways we can do it. I mean, on a local level, I would say talk to your family, talk to your kids, talk to your neighbors. It could be an awkward thing to breach, but you'd be surprised the amount of people who are using street drugs. You'd be surprised, professionals and folks that are not working. are all have access to these things. Kids have access to them. I already have conversations with my daughter. Like, if someone's gave you candy and the wrapper's already open, you can't have it. And if your feelings are hurt as a third grader that they wanted to give you a Sour Patch Kid and daddy said no because the wrapper is open, I'll buy you a king size one after school. Like, like there's the amount of kids overdosing, the amount of folks that having accidental deaths. I've lost three relatives, three cousins to accidental deaths on overdosing. Two of them were surprises. One of them I knew he used some drugs, but no drug is actually safe because many of them are already laced and cut with fentanyl and other opioids because it makes it stronger and it's cheaper to make it that way. And so even casual users, so I said conversations and normalizing those awkward conversations is a big deal. On a more of an institutional level, know the dangers, and people like that are the ones putting a lot of the awareness campaigns out. And so asking about ways that you can partner with them or the state of Minnesota to do to expand that voice or find more ways to localize it to spaces that maybe you're not hearing about. News attention is big. I don't think there can ever be enough news and media attention. Urban Ventures doesn't specifically work with any chemical dependency issues and challenges, but we do have access to a lot of families. And so tapping into neighborhood organizations and seeing how they're dealing with it and how you can support them to be more specific in dealing with those challenges is big. But it really is something that is going to take our whole society combating. It doesn't help that the timing of other drugs becoming legal and things of that nature further complicate it, just because it gives you extremely more access to things that we still don't have answers on and things that look alike and no one knows the difference. And so I'm not saying, be against any of the legislation that's happening or for it. We got to be mindful of it though, that it's gonna make things more accessible and we're still understanding it. And so that's a danger in and of itself. Yeah.
All right, we wanted to thank you for being here today, Benny, and also thank Brian. So what we do, our Rotary Club does, is we ask you to sign a book that's given to a third grader through one of our nonprofit partners, Way to Grow, that's signed by a leader in the community. So we'll ask Brian to do the same thing, and then we also have a City of Lakes Rotary pen that is yours to keep. So great, thank you. All right, and I also wanted to thank our other volunteers for today, Jasmina Galeasabis. Is that right? I'm having trouble with last names apparently today. A reflection by Addie Arnold, and inductions Maria Bavender for both Tim and Christine. Thank you. Our day chair Brian Herder, our speaker Benny Roberts, and our Zoom masters Brock and Greg for all their work. So next 2 weeks we are going to be on Zoom, so we will not be here. So please do not show up. I think somebody showed up last week, but they were able to make it home in time for our meeting. So don't show up here. But next week, Ellen Walthour with Cufflink is going to be here, or at least online, and to talk about bringing donors and nonprofits together. And then on the 14th, Kim Lorenz, who is an author of Tireless: Key Principles That Drive Success Beyond Business School. So 2 great topics. So we will see you online, not here. And with that, go out and have a wonderful Rotary week. I'm going to ring the bell.